I talked to Jim before, we're going to keep it kind of informal, but if you do have questions, I'm going to kind of run through. The sort of title of the presentation is The State of the Arts in Greater Des Moines, and it's an interesting story to tell, especially coming off the last year. As Jim said, I'm the executive director of Bravo Greater Des Moines. I am originally from Chicago. I moved here with my husband for his job. He was a contracted employee at the time, and we thought we would stay for 3 years because people from Chicago do not move to Des Moines in their early 20s. And that was 25 years ago. So it's been a wonderful community for us. We've had so much opportunity here, and I've been at Bravo about 7.5 years, almost exactly 7.5 years. And I remember because I started on January 1, so it's easy to count. It's easy to count the time as it goes. But the organization has changed and grown a lot in that time. I'm really proud of what we get to do, and I'll share a little bit with you, but would love for it to be a dialogue. If you have questions, or if something doesn't make sense, or if you want to know more, I promise you I could talk for hours about all of this, and would just love to engage with you in a conversation this morning. So just a little bit more background. Jim shared a little bit about who we are, but Bravo was formed in 2004, still a fairly new organization. And originally we were a collaboration between 9 local governments in Greater Des Moines that recognized that arts and culture were going to be a significant factor in the region's success. Quality of life was something that needed investment, and it needed stable and consistent investment. So these 9 local governments came together and all agreed to contribute a portion of their hotel motel taxes, the 2/7 that Jim was talking about, to Bravo Greater Des Moines. We then were primarily at that point to serve as a centralized grant funder to the arts. Prior to Bravo's formation, I'll use an example, maybe organizations that you know, Des Moines Performing Arts and the Science Center of Iowa and the Zoo were already getting this money from the city of Johnston. But all 3 of those organizations were coming and making separate presentations to the city council. The city council then was having to make separate decisions on how much do they want to invest in Des Moines Performing Arts or the Zoo or the Science Center. Then they were having to process all of those checks, manage all of those grants, make sure that those funds were getting and it was a huge administrative project. Multiply that by, at the time, there were about, I'm going to say 15 organizations that were probably doing that. Times 9 cities was a lot of time and effort spent on divvying up these hotel motel taxes. So a lot of people originally looked at Bravo as an administrative efficiency. We were a single entity where all the dollars could go. We could make those single decisions and distribute the funds on behalf of the region more efficiently than every city doing their own thing. So one of the things about Bravo that's important to know is we were formed in that function to serve nonprofit arts, culture, and heritage organizations. We don't fund individual artists, and we don't fund and support any of the for-profit events that are happening, for example, down at like Wells Fargo Arena, things that are happening like on that scale. That's just not what we were formed to do. So our range is really the nonprofit cultural sector. And as Jim said, right now, currently, we're supporting about 70 nonprofit organizations in our region. And I'll say last year we managed, we invest annually about $4.5 million in those 70 organizations. So as the region has grown, the revenue that's available to Bravo has grown, and we're very proud of the support we're able to provide. And we do it through I don't want to say complex, but it's a thoughtful funding process to make sure that we are transparent and accountable and being good stewards of the funds that are entrusted to us. Bravo is actually now supported by 17 local governments. We go north to Polk City, south to Indianola, west to Waukee, and east to Altoona, Pleasant Hill. We don't have aspirations to get any bigger. We're not looking to take over the world. We feel like this is the right geography for the work that we are here to do, and are grateful for the funding and support that we get. We are, as I said, best known for that grant making, and we are 99.9% funded with hotel motel taxes. We do virtually no additional fundraising. That's intentional. We don't want to compete with the organizations we were formed to support. For example, Bankers Trust. If they have $100,000 available for community giving in any given year, we want them to give it to the organizations that are important to them and to their employees. We don't need them to give it to Bravo so we can distribute it. We have a dedicated revenue stream. The agreements that we're in are perpetual. A city would have to actively opt out in order to stop funding Bravo. So we're going to let the private dollars go directly to the organizations. We intentionally don't fundraise, with the exception of once a year we do have a gala and we do sell tickets to the gala. But that's the only thing that we do. Over the last 15 years, Bravo's invested a little bit more than $40 million in arts and culture. People just often don't have a sense that we even exist, let alone the magnitude with which we are supporting arts and culture in the community. And the cultural landscape has grown considerably. Our first grant year was 2006. There were 33 funded partners that year. And as I said, we're up over 70 funded partners right now. In addition to that grant-making function, though, we also provide leadership to conversations about arts and culture in our region. And an example I'll use that is relevant to Johnston is conversations about public art. I think many communities like Johnston are looking to public art as a way to differentiate, as a way to express your community, as a way to create spaces where people want to be, and public art is often an important aspect of that. And so Bravo in 2018 and 2019 led a series of conversations that brought together all of the leadership from all of the communities to talk about public art together. So Johnston could learn what was happening in Urbandale, could learn what was happening in Pleasant Hill, and create some connections and some conversations. We don't need to recreate the wheel. We can connect with each other and have good conversations. Many of the cities are already doing that, but it was an opportunity for us to provide some education about best practices in public art. Like everything, the world is changing fast, and making sure that people stay up to speed and connected. So we provide leadership on conversations about the role of arts and culture in our community. And I'm a huge believer that arts and culture is connected to everything. If you said one thing that you wanted to accomplish as a city or as part of this region or even as the state of Iowa, I could tell you how arts and culture can make it better. And it's really important that our communities start seeing arts and culture as integrated into everything, as opposed to separate and nice to have amenities over here. They're really critical. So as I said, in our investment role, we have done some things really well and a lot to be proud of. And last year, in our most recent grant cycle, it was about $4 million that we awarded. There's often a perception that the money is all going to the large organizations, like I said, the Civic Center, the Zoo, the Science Center, Living History Farms. In actuality, we only have about 11 organizations that have budgets over $1 million. All the rest of the organizations that we support have budgets that are generally below $250,000. So our largest award was in our last full grant cycle year. Our largest award was $695,000 and our smallest award was $850. So we support a wide range of organizations through our processes and through our programs. Most of the work that we do beyond the grant making is focused on regional priorities that we developed in 2017. And the purpose was to make that case, again, for arts and culture being aligned with everything else that's important to our region. There's a regional vision plan, a strategy, if you will, called Capital Crossroads. I don't know if you've had a presentation about Capital Crossroads, but that would be an interesting thing to talk about as well. But Capital Crossroads basically serves as a strategic plan for the region. It was done by the Greater Des Moines Partnership and several other partners. It is then, for us, we took that strategic plan and what are the main priorities of that strategic plan, and we attached arts and culture to that strategic plan. And there are 4 priorities that came out of that we are now as an organization very focused on. It has become our mission to advance these regional cultural priorities. The first is everyday, everywhere art. People want more access to more art in more places. Instead of art being something you have to buy a ticket to or mark on your calendar to attend, it should just be around you all the time. That could be anything from public art in the park to musicians that are playing outside wherever you are. All kinds of ways to look at that. Spontaneous creative collisions. Sidewalk chalk art is another thing. Smaller festivals, things that happen that you just sort of happen upon, and they bring joy and art and culture to your life. A second priority for us was to strengthen the creative economy. We know that the individual artists in our region make a significant contribution to our economy, but they're not feeling quite as connected to our entrepreneurial climate as some of our small businesses are. So we need to continue to nurture those individual artists and make sure that they have the resources and the training that they need in order to be successful at their craft. Cultural tapestry was our third priority. That one is really about everyone seeing themselves in the arts and culture that is expressed in our region. There is a tremendous amount of arts, culture, and heritage available, but not everyone who lives here sees their culture represented and sees their heritage represented. And we need to do a better job of welcoming communities in through our arts and cultural expression. And then finally, youth connections, to the surprise of no one. The more arts and culture that young people have exposure to as young people, the more likely they are to be upstanding humans as grown-ups. And that includes both informal and formal learning. So the school classes that they're getting, but also opportunities that they have outside of school, again, to attend festivals or take classes or play the guitar on a street corner if that's what so moves them. So those four priorities are the things that Bravo's really focused on. And it's really important that we do this work. Sometimes I give this presentation and people think, oh, that's nice that we have that organization. But in actuality, it's a significant economic engine. As I said, Bravo invests about $4 million a year on behalf of the 17 cities we represent. We invest that into the nonprofit cultural sector, and annually, that nonprofit cultural sector is generating about $185 million worth of regional economic impact. It's significant. So $4 million turned into $185 million. I challenge you to find a better investment for your tax dollars, for those hotel motel tax dollars. The sector employs about 5,500 people. My statistics are old. We're going to have to see how the data come back after COVID. But these are big numbers. These are important numbers for our region. We also love, particularly when we give this presentation to our elected officials that support Bravo, the sector also provides a significant amount of tax revenue, of course, that people are coming and they're not only paying hotel motel taxes, but they're buying a meal, they're staying in a parking garage, they're paying for their tickets, they're hopefully shopping while they're around, and so the organizations that we support are also generating about $17 million worth of additional tax revenue every year. So it's not, sometimes there's a misperception that nonprofits, and particularly cultural nonprofits, are just on the take, right? They're just benefiting from generosity and philanthropy. These numbers clearly show that they're significant contributors to our region and to our economy. So then there was COVID. I don't know when I'm going to take this part out of my presentation. I'm not quite there yet because the cultural organizations are not back yet. But there was no sector hit harder. If you look at U.S. Department of Labor statistics, there was no sector hit harder than the leisure and hospitality industry, which includes arts and cultural venues and experiences. In the first 3 months of the pandemic, February, March, and April 2020, there was more than a 50% loss in employment to that sector. The vast majority of organizations lost not only all of their earned revenue because they had to close down, but they lost all of their contributed revenue because no one knew what was coming. And so employees were laid off, and it was a substantial loss to the sector. We did some data collection with Americans for the Arts. We know that the total financial impact, and my numbers are a little bit old, but the total financial impact back in November of 2020 was about $40 million. That's a $40 million loss to the cultural organizations across the state of Iowa, not just in our region. But we know that about 13 million of that loss came from Greater Des Moines. We know that a substantial portion of the large organizations are here in Greater Des Moines. We know that 97% of the nonprofit organizations had to cancel events. We know that about 3.5 million people did not get to go to arts and cultural experiences, anticipated attendance losses. Of the organizations that responded to this survey, the question was, how severe do you expect the financial impact to your organization will be? 57% responded they thought that it would be extremely severe. The scary number in that is that 8% responded that they did not think they would make it through the pandemic. So if you do that math on the 70 organizations that Bravo is supporting, 8%, 5, 6, 7, depending on the organization and the size of their budget. So then you start to get to questions of which ones can we afford to lose? Which ones aren't important enough for our region to stick with? And those are really difficult conversations. Now, I'm pleased to say that many organizations at this point are starting to come back. We are starting to see not only venues open for participation, like the Botanic Garden, like the zoo, the Science Center, many of our small organizations that put on festivals. Hopefully everybody has the Arts Festival on their calendar for this weekend. That's going to be such an exciting thing for our region to have everybody gathered back together downtown. But not every organization is going to come back the same way. So those organizations that have opportunities to be outside, that have opportunities to naturally built in social distancing, such as a Botanic Garden, those are probably going to come back sooner. People are probably going to feel more comfortable going back there more quickly than they will maybe to venues that are enclosed spaces or require tighter seating, such as a performing arts venue or, for example, a science center where everything is about touch, everything is about getting engaged and having an experience with community. Some of those organizations are not probably going to come back as quickly. And then certainly organizations that primarily have audiences made up of older audiences, we don't know how those are going to come back. We don't know how comfortable people are going to be sitting next to, shoulder to shoulder, people in a theater again once those opportunities are available. So it'll be interesting to see, but important to note that it's, Jim and I were talking at the beginning of the presentation, it's starting to feel normal again. I went to the movies this weekend, going out to eat at a restaurant. It's starting to feel normal again. There's going to be a long tail for our cultural organizations. It's going to take a long time for them to get back to normal. Now, all that said paints a fairly dire picture, and it certainly wasn't the best year for most of our arts and cultural organizations, but despite the challenges, there are so many success stories. And one of the things I love about the job that I get to do is seeing the resilience and the creativity and the innovation of these organizations. And we see it all the time, but particularly in 2020, we had a great opportunity to do hard things and learn together. And so a couple examples were the Des Moines Community Playhouse couldn't get people in the theater last summer, but their entire mission is to put on theater productions. And so they did drive-in theater, and they set up a very makeshift temporary stage in their parking lot, and they brought in cars, and the cars were socially distanced from one another. And my favorite part of this whole story is that the only technology they could use so that the car in the back could hear the stage in the front was going back to your good old FM radio. And my kids could not get over the fact that we used to listen to the radio like that and tuning in. It was just a fun conversation. My favorite part of that story is they were originally imagining this, and how can we do drive-in theater, and how can we get enough people to come to make it, to make it effective and give it some life, because all the parking spots were, head to head, and we certainly can't do that. And someone in a meeting said, why don't we repaint the parking lines? And so they reformatted the parking lot so that they could get more cars in and make it a more welcoming space. And that's the kind of thing that I think artists do uniquely well, is they say, well, why do we have to park straight up and down? Why can't we park sideways and repaint the parking lines? We own the parking garage. So I just love that story as a creative problem-solving opportunity. There's an organization in our community called Art Force Iowa. If you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to learn about it. Art Force Iowa serves some of our most vulnerable youth, offering them opportunities to express themselves through art as they're experiencing trauma in their lives. And it is led by a phenomenal executive director, Christine Herr, who just won the American Express Emerging Leaders Award. It's a national award. She's doing tremendous work. But this community was very hard hit. These young people did not, as schools were shut down, they did not necessarily have resources at home, community to support them. So Art Force Iowa created art meetups, and they were virtual, but they drove all of these art kits. I have a picture of it, but they drove all of these art supplies out to these young people so that while they were quarantining at home, they would still have access to art and expression and the opportunity to do something positive with their time. City Voices is an organization that provides voice lessons for young people that can't afford them. If you want to pursue voice in college, you almost have to have private voice lessons moving forward, and in high school. Private voice lessons are not free generally. City Voices provides either scholarships or free voice lessons so that anyone who wants to pursue voice moving forward has access and opportunity. All of these seniors who have been rehearsing and practicing and preparing for their auditions, well, they didn't get to do their recitals, their senior recitals. So City Voices put all of those recitals out virtually, so there was an opportunity for families to engage and participate and celebrate the work of these young students. And then organizations like the Symphony, of course, were able to figure out a way to provide the highest quality symphonic music by performing on the 4th floor of the temple, everybody spread out 6 feet apart, all of that recorded. They actually have talked about ways to continue this, maybe not from the socially distanced presentation, but how can they continue to provide virtual programming, because it's been so popular and actually expanded their audience. They have more people participating in some of their concerts because of that virtual access. So not a great start to 2020, many difficulties throughout the year, but it's really critical for everyone to understand that very few of our organizations shut down. Very few of them said we can't. Most of them said, what is our option? What is our path forward? How can we continue to serve our mission? And I'm really proud that Bravo was around to be able to support them during this time. We actually, through solid financial management and good planning, and I will say just an honest amount of dumb luck, we were able to continue. We had enough money in our bank accounts that we were able to have last year be our largest grant year ever. We were able to push out as much money as we have ever pushed out, knowing that we were probably the only revenue stream for a variety of the organizations we were supporting. Because of the steady hotel motel taxes that we have had in the past, we were able to do that. That's the good news. The bad news is there's not a lot of gas left in the tank for Bravo at this point. So we are really eager to see our organizations get back to their earned revenue, get back to contributed revenue from corporate partners, and Bravo will continue to be there investing what we can when we can, but the landscape has changed. I will say that the thing to be super proud of there is that our model worked. We are there as an organization. We were formed to support the nonprofit sector through high and low, and our model worked, and our cultural community survived. To my knowledge, not one of Bravo's cultural partners has folded over the last 18 months. They have all made it through. We'll see what the next 18 months show, but it's really exciting to be able to say that there has been a survival rate and a reopening, which I think is really positive and exciting. So as far as a takeaway from me, I hope that we can all be advocates for the role of arts and culture in our region. From an economic standpoint, from a quality of life standpoint, but also from the standpoint of workforce attraction, from community benefit, from tourism. everything we want to accomplish as a region is made better because of the cultural landscape that we have. And it's important that we all talk about that, and we're all advocates for that, especially as difficult decisions need to be made about resources. We want to make sure that arts and culture are always at the top of the list because they truly are a contributing factor to everything that's important to making our region such a great place to live and work and play.